Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, May 8th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is looking quite nice today, with a high of 82.5 degrees expected and a comfortable low tonight around 59.5. It's shaping up to be a pleasant one. Coming up on the show, we'll delve into the significant disagreements brewing among House Republicans. We'll explore exactly why they're fighting over proposed cuts to Medicaid and what the potential impacts of these changes could be for millions of Americans who rely on the program. Following that, we turn our attention to consumer safety, examining the critical reasons why U.S. regulation of potentially toxic ingredients in beauty products is widely considered to fall short, leaving consumers to navigate a complex landscape. We have these important stories and more analysis coming your way on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We turn now to Capitol Hill, where a significant battle is brewing within the House Republican Conference. They're grappling with proposed steep cuts to Medicaid and other social programs, all to offset the cost of extending Trump-era tax breaks. For more on this fiscal tug-of-war, we have our news reporter Ethan. Ethan, this sounds like a major undertaking.
It certainly is, Grace. House Republicans are pushing hard to pass what President Trump has called his, quote, big, beautiful bill, end quote. And according to reporting from the Las Vegas Sun and AOL, they've set a rather ambitious Memorial Day deadline for themselves. That's just 18 days from today, May 8th. A key part of this legislative push is to extend about $4 trillion to $4.5 trillion in tax cuts from President Trump's first term, which, as WFMJ and the Las Vegas Sun remind us, are set to expire at the end of 2025.
$4 to $4.5 trillion is a hefty sum. So how are they proposing to pay for keeping these tax cuts in place? It sounds like they're trying to have their tax cake and cut it too, but the recipe is causing some serious heartburn.
That's a good way to put it, Grace. To finance these extensions, the GOP is aiming for around $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. Medicaid is a primary target here, and WFMJ noted that programs like food stamps are also on the chopping block. However, some conservative factions are pushing for even deeper cuts. AOL reports that a group of 32 Republicans, led by Representative Lloyd Smucker, is demanding at least $2 trillion in verifiable savings, threatening to vote against the bill otherwise.
So Medicaid is squarely in the crosshairs. What specific changes are they considering to achieve these savings? For many of our viewers, the mechanics of Medicaid funding can be a bit of a maze.
Absolutely, Grace. There are several controversial mechanisms being debated. One is adjusting the Federal Medical Assistance Percentage, or FMAP. As AOL and the Perplexity API detail, this would mean lowering the federal government's matching funds to states, especially for those who enrolled in Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Essentially, it shifts more of the financial burden onto individual states. Then there are per capita caps, which AOL and Perplexity API also mention. This would limit federal Medicaid spending per enrollee to a fixed amount, instead of matching actual costs. Representative Brett Guthrie, who chairs the House Energy and Commerce Committee, indicated these caps are still being weighed.
So less federal money per person, or a smaller share from Washington overall. What else is on the table?
There's broad Republican agreement on implementing work requirements for able-bodied adult Medicaid recipients. That's according to WFMJ, the Las Vegas Sun, AOL, and the Perplexity API. Stricter and more frequent eligibility verification, including citizenship checks, also has wide support. Representative Kat Kamak, as quoted by AOL, said the goal is to ensure, quote, anyone who is eligible remains eligible, and people who should not be on the program, aka illegals, are not on the program, end quote. WFMJ also mentioned potential restrictions on aid to immigrants without legal status. And finally, the Perplexity API noted GOP lawmakers aim to eliminate Medicaid provider taxes, which could save the federal government over $600 billion over a decade, but would involve shifting costs. However, AOL reported that measures like work requirements and eligibility checks alone won't generate the huge savings leadership is looking for.
It sounds like a complex puzzle, and then the Congressional Budget Office dropped a report. Did that CBO report throw a wrench in the works, or perhaps a calculator?
It definitely complicated matters significantly for House Speaker Mike Johnson. The nonpartisan CBO, as reported by WFMJ and the Las Vegas Sun, estimated that millions of Americans could lose Medicaid coverage under these proposed cuts. The Las Vegas Sun specified that the CBO found some changes could result in roughly 10 million people losing Medicaid. The Perplexity API cited a CBO estimate that certain cuts could lead to 5.5 million fewer people on Medicaid and 2.5 million becoming uninsured, saving about $700 billion over time. This report, as you can imagine, has created uncertainty for the Speaker and has been seized upon by Democrats.
10 million people potentially losing coverage is a staggering number. This must be causing quite a stir within the Republican Party. Are we seeing a case of a House divided against itself?
Very much so, Grace. The CBO's projections have fueled a revolt among centrist and moderate Republicans, especially those from swing districts, who are worried about constituents losing health care. AOL reports that Representative Don Bacon, a centrist, believes the bill would fail if those FMAP changes and per-person spending caps are included. And according to the Perplexity API, a group of 12 Republican lawmakers, including California Representatives David Valadao and Young Kim, explicitly stated their opposition to any final bill that reduces Medicaid coverage for vulnerable groups. On the other side, conservative hardliners like Representative Scott Perry have told AOL they won't vote for a bill that increases the deficit.
So Speaker Johnson is really walking a political tightrope with such a narrow majority. How is he navigating this?
It's an incredibly tough balancing act. AOL notes he has a narrow 220 to 213 majority, meaning he can only afford to lose 3 Republican votes. The Perplexity API reports he acknowledged a brief pause to, quote, get it right, end quote, after consulting with former President Trump, but he's reiterated that Memorial Day deadline. As of today, May 8th, the Perplexity API indicates FMAP adjustments, per capita caps, and work requirements are still under serious consideration.
And what about the deficit? Republicans often cite rising deficits as a key concern. Will these proposed cuts actually make a dent, or is this more of a fiscal fig leaf?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, Grace. The CBO projects that extending the $4.5 trillion in Trump-era tax breaks without any central DOS offsetting spending cuts would add about $4.5 to $4.7 trillion to the federal deficit over 10 years, according to the Perplexity API. So the Republican plan to cut $1.5 trillion against $4.5 trillion in tax breaks would still result in a net deficit increase of roughly $3 trillion. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, cited by Perplexity API, projects that extending these tax cuts would add over $37 trillion to the debt by 2054. The Perplexity API concluded that this suggests the main goal is maintaining tax cuts rather than comprehensively tackling rising deficits.
So the path forward to that Memorial Day deadline seems fraught with uncertainty.
Exactly, Grace. As of today, the Perplexity API highlights that the specific Medicaid reforms that will make it into any bill, the precise savings, and whether such a bill can even pass the House by May 26th remain very uncertain.
Ethan, thank you for breaking down this incredibly complex and contentious budget battle for us. It's clear there are many more fiscal fireworks to come. We're turning now to a rather alarming issue that might have many of you checking your bathroom cabinets. There are ongoing, significant concerns about cancer-causing chemicals lurking in everyday beauty products, with a particularly heavy burden falling on women of color. Joining us to unpack this is our health and consumer reporter, Chloe. Chloe, this sounds like more than just a cosmetic concern.
It absolutely is, Grace. This isn't just skin deep. A really pivotal study highlighted by NPR back on May 8, 2024, published in Environmental Science and Technology Letters, painted a stark picture. Researchers in Los Angeles found that over half of the Black and Latina women they studied regularly use personal care products containing formaldehyde and what are known as formaldehyde-releasing preservatives, or FRPs. These are known carcinogens.
Formaldehyde. That's a potent chemical. What kind of products are we talking about, and why are these chemicals even in there?
Well, the study involved 64 women who meticulously logged their product use for a week, even photographing ingredient lists. These harmful chemicals were found in a wide array of items: lotions, shampoos, conditioners, skin lighteners, and even eyelash glue. As NPR's report underscored, these chemicals are often intentionally added. There are also significant social and economic pressures that can compel Black and Latina women to use these potentially harmful items to conform to prevailing, often Eurocentric, beauty standards. It's a complex issue.
It certainly sounds like a beautiful mess for consumers. Are formaldehyde and its releasers the only culprits we should be worried about?
Unfortunately, no. A report from WEKU, drawing from various studies, highlighted other hazardous substances. Beyond direct carcinogens like paraformaldehyde and quaternium-15, which is an FRP, some products contain endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Now, EDCs aren't definitively linked to cancer in all cases, but they are associated with hormonally driven cancers like breast and prostate cancer. WEKU also pointed to concerns about 1,4-dioxane, another carcinogen, which can be found in up to 40% of so-called natural personal care products. It's often unlisted because it can be a contaminant in ingredients like PEG or polyethylene.
40% in natural products? That's quite a shock. Is there a particular demographic facing higher exposure from these other chemicals too?
Yes, and it's deeply concerning. WEKU reported that products marketed specifically to Black women are of particular concern, with nearly 80% containing ingredients linked to increased risks of breast and uterine cancer. This highlights significant racial disparities in exposure. Compounding this, WEKU described how there's generally less government oversight for cosmetics and personal care products compared to other consumer goods, despite these serious health links.
So with all this evidence, what's the regulatory response? Is the government stepping in to clear the air? Or perhaps clear the shelves?
The federal response has been slow and somewhat narrowly focused. According to information from Perplexity API, as of today, May 8, 2025, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has proposed a rule to ban formaldehyde and formaldehyde-releasing ingredients. However, this ban is specifically for hair smoothing and straightening products. It doesn't address the broader exposure risks from those other common products like lotions and shampoos that the NPR reported study identified. This proposal has also faced significant delays, with the latest expected proposal date pushed to March 2025, and an executive order pausing all new regulations might add further delays.
So the federal approach is a bit tangled. Are states attempting to brush away these concerns with their own rules?
Some states are indeed taking more decisive action. Perplexity API reports that California and Washington state enacted their own toxic-free cosmetics acts, which banned formaldehyde and formaldehyde-releasing chemicals in all cosmetics, effective January 1st of this year, 2025. Maryland and New York have also implemented restrictions on these substances in cosmetics.
That sounds more promising. But are these state laws really making a clean sweep? How effective are they, especially for such a wide range of products beyond hair straighteners?
That's where it gets complicated. In Washington state, as Perplexity API notes, the act prohibits added formaldehyde from January 1, 2025. However, the Washington Department of Ecology is still in the process of rulemaking to identify and restrict formaldehyde releasers, with a public comment period that closed last August. So enforcement on those releasers is still being established. Plus, retailers in Washington can sell existing non-compliant stock they had before January 1, 2025, all the way until December 31st of this year, which is 237 days from today. In California, enforcement is handled by state health departments through testing and inspections, but detecting formaldehyde that forms from releasers over a product's shelf life is a challenge. As of now, Perplexity API confirms there's no public data from either state showing a measured reduction of these chemicals in products like general lotions or eyelash glue since the bans took effect.
How does the U.S. compare internationally on this? Are we lagging behind in applying these safety measures?
Significantly, Grace. NPR's 2024 report mentioned that the European Union banned formaldehyde in cosmetics all the way back in 2009. And Perplexity API further notes that countries like Saudi Arabia require testing for formaldehyde in certain products as part of their registration processes. So we are playing catch-up.
This is all quite eye-opening, Chloe, and not in a good way for consumers. What are experts advocating for? And what can people do to protect themselves while these regulations slowly evolve?
Advocates are definitely calling for increased government oversight, similar to the EU's approach as reported by NPR. The authors of that Los Angeles study recommend consumers read product labels very carefully and advocate for ingredient bans at the state level. And as WEKU highlighted, growing awareness, helped by resources like the Environmental Working Group's Skin Deep database, is pushing for safer product formulations. It's about being an informed consumer and pushing for systemic change.
Some very important advice there. Thank you, Chloe, for shedding light on this critical issue and helping us all become more aware of what we're putting on our skin.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. In Vatican City, the wait continues for a new pope. Black smoke was seen yesterday, May 7, 2025, from the Sistine Chapel's chimney, indicating that the 133 cardinals gathered in the papal conclave have not yet reached the required two-thirds consensus. The conclave began Wednesday with a mass in St. Peter's Basilica, after which cardinals took oaths of secrecy and handed in their phones. Voting is set to resume today, with up to 4 rounds possible. Pietro Parolin and Luis Antonio Tagle are among those considered favorites to succeed Pope Francis. Thousands have gathered in St. Peter's Square, eagerly awaiting the white smoke that will signal a successful election. Stateside, a new AP NORC poll from April 2025 reveals growing anxiety among older Americans about Social Security. About 3 in 10 U.S. adults aged 60 or older are not very or not at all confident that benefits will be available when needed, an increase from about 2 in 10 in 2023. This shift varies by political party, with older Democrats showing a substantial decrease in confidence, while older Republicans have become more confident. These concerns arise as the Social Security Administration undergoes changes, including staffing cuts, though new Commissioner Frank Bisignano has stated the administration will protect Social Security. Also in the U.S., Chief Justice John Roberts emphasized the importance of judicial independence during a speech in Buffalo, New York, on May 7th. Speaking at the 125th anniversary of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York, Roberts called the judiciary a co-equal branch, with the authority to interpret the Constitution and, if necessary, invalidate acts of Congress or the President. He reiterated his stance against impeaching judges over disagreements with their rulings and defended the occasional necessity of overturning precedents. Internationally, today marks the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, or VE Day, commemorating the formal end of World War II in Europe on May 8, 1945, when Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allied powers. While a day of celebration, some reflections are tinged with a sense of dread due to current global conflicts and rising tensions, prompting a sober look at the ongoing quest for peace. And finally, at Columbia University in New York City, pro-Palestinian demonstrators, many wearing masks and keffiyehs, clashed with university security guards on Wednesday, May 8. The confrontation occurred after demonstrators attempted to protest or occupy campus buildings. These protests, part of a movement ongoing since April 2024, call for the university to divest from Israel and are reflective of broader campus activism related to the Gaza war. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.